Starting a brand new deal on our station here, and it's going to be a podcast and or interviews of some of my friends. And the first one that we have is Brother Pete Giesel. He's from Toronto, and he's had a very, very interesting Christian life. And so we had an interview, and so I'll leave you to it. Okay. Well, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend Pete Giesel, all the way from Toronto, the Big Smoke. But he's
Big,
got a unique testimony. He's got a long history of living in Europe and Germany during the perilous times. Not now, but the last perilous times we were in. And so, good afternoon, Brother Pete. It's good to have you here.
good to hear from you, brother Steve. Always good to see you.
Yes. So, where were you born? Start from the beginning.
I was born in what's known northwestern Germany. We were about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from Hamburg. Sort of a country setting. That's where my father and my mother, my grandparents, that's where they settled after the Second World War, and uh, they were basically directed because when the war was over, there was no. It was very difficult for people to find work. And so the best place that you could work would be on farms because on farm nobody had any money.
Right?
And so, but on farms at least you had access to food, you had shelter. And so for probably the first, I would say from the end of the war uh, up until 1949, so 45 to 49, for 4 years, they worked on these farms. My father and his mother and father were separated after the war. Where my grandparents lived, where my dad was from, that became part of Poland and part of
Oh,
Czechoslovakia after the war was over. So they lost everything they had. And I don't know how they all met and how they got reconnected because my father was in the army. At the end of the war, he ended up in Italy. He ended up in a British intern camp for roughly a year.
huh,
My grandfather got dragged into the war right towards the end of the war. My grandfather was born in 1900, and so at the end of the war, he would have been in his mid 40s.
right.
And so those older men at the end of the war, and because of where they lived, he ended up in Russia, which was which was not a good place to end up because many of those men never came back.
Pretty grim, but he
They,
made it. He made it back.
I don't know. I don't know. I never talked to him how he got out.
Oh,
It may have to do because of his age, that he was not a younger man,
right.
and but he was able to get out. Like many of those men ended up in labor camps, and you stayed there until you were dead. I mean, they wouldn't let you go. But
Oh
he
boy.
got out. He got out, and he actually got out before my dad did. And they ended up. He found my grandmother. I think in those Germans are meticulous record keepers.
Yes.
They're like they just everything is written down, and so the communication in those days was all done through the Red Cross. And so wherever my grandmother ended up, because of the connection with the Red Cross, my grandfather was able to find her. And so she was in West Germany at that time. And then when my dad, they hung on to him for a year in that British camp that he was in, and then he made his way back into Germany and was able to find his parents. And around about the same time, my mother is Estonian. She ended up in Germany during the war, and they ended up working on farms in that same area, different farms, not the same farm. And that's how my mom and dad met.
I see. So when if you're in around Estonia or Czechoslovakia and you were German, were you in any kind of danger from the local people there that would
Uh, I'm
remember?
sure, I'm sure there were problems because brother Fred Crisco gave me a little book one time that was printed by a Brethren outfit, and it talked about a German family. They were separated. The father ended up in the army. He ended up dying, and they were from the same area that my grandparents were from. It was a mother with four children, And it was just a horrendous story how they were able to uh, get out and actually on foot make their way into West Germany. It was very, very dangerous for them to stay. If you were German, you automatically had a target on your back, even though they had nothing to do with, with Hitler, with any of those. Like my grandfather was totally, he hated that regime. He was older, and he always called them. They had a name in German what they call Bunsen, which is basically just a bully. Like
Right.
Hitler disarmed everybody, but his own people, his own police force were armed to the teeth. People were terrified, and so so it was dangerous. It was definitely dangerous to be of German descent.
Well,
Many German There were many Germans that were left behind that never did get out. Like to this day, there are Germans in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and I think it took years for the people. And I understand the people who live there. When you have an army come in and do what the devastation that they did, I can fully understand the local people and the attitude that they would have towards you. I
yes,
get it. I'm not going to justify it, but I can understand why they would do that. Yeah.
sure. So your grandpa would have known the days when people were, spending thousands of Deutschmarks for a loaf of bread, and when the economy collapsed.
I actually had a bunch of those bills that were left in my mom's house in Dryden, and it was it was in a tin box in my mother's attic, and it still may be the house has been sold. And so that tin box with all those old German bills, there's a whole bunch of Canadian coins. I collected coins.
Oh yeah.
And there was an issue that happened in Dryden that my mom just recently, within the last couple of years, my mother sold that house, and basically all my belongings that were in that house are gone.
So if you're listening, whoever you are, that has that house.
Oh, check out the attic because it was actually hidden under insulation
Oh,
in the attic of that house.
that might be quite a treasure.
Well, there's not. There's a whole box of coins. I got old coins from the Canadian coins from the early 1900s. There's a whole set of. I know these are. To me, they're valuable. They're the whole set of centennial coins that was there, the dollar coin, the 50-cent piece, and it was all in that box. I had a whole slew of old nickels from the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never asked you about this, but uh, your mom during the war, what did she have a gunshot wound? Was she shot at one time?
She lost a finger from shrapnel.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'd
Ever look
heard that, and
If
I
you look at
never.
her, if you look at her left hand, you'll see that I think it's the middle finger,
Yeah.
not the whole finger, but half of it got shot off. Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you made your way to Canada finally.
1963.
Where did you get saved?
I got saved. I was around 25 years of age. So around 1976
Oh yeah, yeah.
is when I got, it was towards the end of the year. It was in December. And I was just a street druggie, just a bad person.
Huh?
And got into all kinds of trouble. I was smart enough to avoid the cops, and they tried over and over and over again because I was not a dealer, but I hung around with some really, really bad people, and they didn't know, the cops. Nobody knew what I did or what I didn't do, and just by association, I
Sure.
I, I had my car ripped apart many, many times in the town of Dryden. I was around people when people got busted. I was very cautious. I never carried anything, so anytime I did get pulled over, I never had nothing on me. But I had people in the vehicle with me. There was one particular guy. He was in my car twice, late at night, and I would always tell him, "Empty your pockets. I don't want nothing in my car." And he was just so dumb. He always carried stuff. And so two different times in the middle of the night, he got dragged out of the car and got busted. And they tried to hang stuff on me, but I just never carried.
Right.
And but that led to really, really I hung around with some really, really bad people. And the drug end of it for me was, it was actually a spiritual, I had a hunger for spiritual things. And when I started doing the drugs, it opened up doors that I had no idea how dangerous those doors were. And the more I got involved in that, it got worse and worse. It doesn't get any better. And I had two of my friends in 1975 committed suicide.
Hmm.
And it just, the Lord used those incidents. When that stuff was happening, I was always a reader, and I started reading books by Hal Lindsey. And in those books, I saw Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I came to the realization, the more I read, the more I was convinced that he was real and that he was the savior of souls to reconcile me to God. And that's how I got saved. And I was not in church. Nobody ever witnessed to me, but God dealt with me. I cried out to God many times. And don't let anybody ever convince you that God does not hear the prayer of an unsaved man. Those were
Right.
not prayers of salvation. I wanted to know what was real. I wanted to know the truth. And God answered that prayer. And I got saved, and it was through our friend Sonny Milanese, who we worked together. And there was a native lady. Her name was Annette. And we all knew each other. I got along with people. I never had a problem. I like people. I always had a good relationship with people. I had a good relationship with the people that I worked with. But she saw something in my life that was happening to me. And she wanted to come and talk to me, but she was afraid of me.
Hmm.
And so she approached Sonny, and she said, something is happening to Peter, and that, why don't you go and try to talk to him? And Sonny came up, and it was really funny, because I don't know if you know the background of Sonny. Sonny he was not somebody to fool around with.
Yeah.
Sonny, I mean, I didn't hang around with him, but I knew who he was, and I knew he was dangerous.
Huh.
And I know Sonny had gotten saved. He got saved about a year before I did. And he was the type of guy, Brother Steve. He would go into the bars, and he would look for the biggest and toughest guy in that bar. And before that night was out, he'd punch their lights out. He
Huh.
would. I don't think anybody ever laid a hand on him. He was so quick. He was so fast. He was dangerous.
Yeah.
And so we knew each other. But he came up to me, and it was, we joked about it in later years. When he came up to me, I mean, I'm not a little guy. Sonny is 3 or 4 inches taller than I am, and I knew his background. And when he came up to me, he stood about 7 or 8 feet away from me, and he looked at me and he said, "Peter, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, sure. What's that?" And he looked at me, and he had a serious look on his face, and he said, "Do you believe in God?" Now, if he would have asked me that question 6 or 7 months earlier, I would have laughed him out of the room. But at that point, the Lord had dealt with my heart, and I just hung up the white flag, and I didn't understand all the ins and outs. I knew who Jesus Christ was. I knew He died for me, and I said, "Yeah, Sonny," I said, I believe in God." And he invited me out to his house, him and Linnea. They just had little Gina. She was a baby at that time. She was probably 2 or 3 years old. And from that point on, he got me going to church. But that was, yeah, that it was, but the things that I got involved in, Archie Dick at Emmanuel Baptist Church, where we attended church for years,
Yes.
I'm very, very hesitant to give a full testimony. I,
Hmm.
I'll do it in private. But
There, there,
there
did you
was, yeah,
did you find a lot of demonic activity or
yes,
devilish
yes,
things to overcome? Yeah.
yes, yes, very much so.
The
And
the scientists, the experts, they'll say that LSD heightens your awareness and you see all kinds of things.
it sure
Maybe
does.
that's of a demonic nature.
They
That's
don't
just
know the door. It does. It definitely. It does that, but they don't know the door that you're opening.
right.
And that door initially just opens up a little bit to get your curiosity. and the more you go down that road, it my avenue. When my two friends, when David Two and David Uni committed suicide, Brother Steve, that's where I was headed.
Hmm.
I carry a list in my Bible from the day that I got saved. I have a list of 13 people within that. There's a 2 year time span. 13 people that I knew in Dryden committed suicide.
Wow. Uh, Around about that time, 1977, 1980, there was a kind of a mini revival around Dryden in
There was
northwestern Ontario, wasn't
there was something. There was definitely a spiritual awakening. There definitely was, and we tried to go back and reach many of the people that I knew. And we had a lot of Brother Don Ohm, who was the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church at that time. My friend Sonny, we spent many days visiting people, knocking on people's doors. We were driving down Duke Street one time,
it?
and there was a little house right across the corner from the high school. It was on the corner of Duke Street and Casimir. There's an apartment building there now, but for years it was a tiny, it was just a little shack that was there. And one of the guys by the name of Jim Blake, who Jim got me going. He was the one who got me down the road of soft drugs, smoking dope and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
he lived in that house, and there were parties there all the time. And we drove by that house one time. Sonny, Pastor Ohm, and I was in the back seat of the car, and there was a big party going on. I think it was on a Friday afternoon. There was a big party going on in that house. There was probably 40, 50 people. And so I just mentioned in passing, oh, Jim Blake's he's having a party. And the next thing I know, that car comes to a screeching halt. And I had no idea what the preacher was planning on. He turned around, he made a U-turn on Duke Street, and we drove into that yard. And the three of us had the opportunity to preach at about 50 people in one shot. And I
Wow.
mean, it was pandemonium. It was just, I was scared initially going in, but the Lord comes in that kind of situation, and I'm a very quiet person. I'm comfortable in the back end of the room, but the Lord gave us boldness going in there, and we just sort of grabbed a group of people. We preached at them all. And there was a young guy inside that. It was in the summertime. It was really hot outside. There was a young guy inside that house, and I forget his first. The last name was Rudder. There's a whole bunch of Rudders in Dryden. They're all related.
Oh, yeah.
He was inside that house. Him and his wife. He had a young girl that they had just gotten married, and I started witnessing to him. I was preaching at him, and he's a tough guy, and I expected him at any time to come flying through that screen door, and I mean, just beat me like Sergeant Snorkel and Beetle Bailey, and he went absolutely wild inside that house, and I kept just giving him the gospel, We were there for probably 20, 30 minutes dealing with those guys, and then finally Brother Ohm said, "Okay, it's time to go."
Yeah.
And so we jumped in the car and we took off. And I was living in Kitchener for a couple of years, and I was gone for a year. I'd come home to my parents over Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's. And I remember driving into, this is like almost a year later. And I drive to take a service in at Emmanuel Baptist Church. I'm driving my father's car because I left my car in Kitchener. And I pulled into the driveway and I approached the door and I come out of the car, and my friend Sonny, he comes running out of the church to give me a big hug because we hadn't seen each other for a while, and we were really close. And he looked at me and he says, "You won't believe who's in church." I had no idea who he was talking about. And so I went inside. That guy that I had been preaching through that door, both him and his wife got saved. They both got saved. They
Rudder.
were in church. Yeah.
If I ever bump into a rudder, I'll ask him.
There's a whole bunch of them. I know there was a Brian Rudder. There was a whole, I don't remember their first names. There was a whole bunch of them. But yeah, if you ever run into them, I don't think he's in Dryden anymore, because I do go back to, I mean, I haven't been back there in quite a number of years.
Yes.
And I used to go back when my mom was still living there, and I used to take the kids up every summer. and we'd visit, with Brother Keith and the people that we knew up there, the saved people that were such good friends of ours. But none of those guys, a lot of them have died.
I
I mean,
suppose.
it's sad. It's just sad. Yeah.
Well, Zoom is threatening to shut us down here. We've
All
got
right.
we've got 1 minute and 28 seconds to go. That's what they're telling me. So,
All right.
but
Well,
it's
we'll do it if you ever want to talk again. We can certainly do this again, Brother Steve, and
oh yeah, there's lots to cover. We never uh,
never
we,
touch anything.
we never got a patch on it yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's just the early part. It's the early part of my Christian life, and there's many stories with Brother Fred Crisco, Marty Lapich, and the different men that got saved, and that God established in the King James Bible. And it's just been
Yeah.
I think about it often. Sonny, we keep in touch. Fred and I keep in touch, and of course, Brother Keith has gone to be with the Lord, and
Yes.
many memories, many memories. Yeah.
He used to talk about the fearsome. Keith Boomhauer used to talk about the fearsome foursome, and it was yourself, Pete Giesel, and Sonny Melanese,
And
and
Marty,
Marty Lapich. Yeah.
we we had our we had our run-ins, sad to say, with a lot of Christians. When we started taking a stand on the Word of God, that we have the Word of God in our hands as a preserved, inspired Word of God, there were many people out there that we had a lot of opposition that we didn't understand. And the
Yeah.
sad part is that got me out of church, Brother Steve, for 5 years. I left the town. I wanted, I mean,